Good morning and welcome to my weekly Love and Gratitude series. As always, I'm grateful to share with you what I shared in French. Today, we are diving into one of the most paradoxical yet liberating truths on a spiritual path: surrender. For many of us, surrender carries an uncomfortable connotation. We have been taught that surrender means giving up, being weak, or letting circumstances dictate our fate. But true surrender is the highest form of spiritual mastery. It is not an act of resignation, but an act of complete trust, trusting in the divine intelligence that flows through us and all things. Let's begin with a short quote from A Course in Miracles. Resign now as your own teacher, for you have been badly taught. This is a powerful call to recognize that much of what we have learned about everything, about control, about effort, about striving, has led us away from peace. Our ego and others' ego took control of our learning. The ego insists that we must figure out everything, that we must push against life, struggle to achieve what we desire, that we must live by a set of rules. But all that is an illusion. That's the definition of the ego. What if instead of controlling every detail, we allowed life to flow through us effortlessly? One of my favorite words, effortlessly, without any ego effort. And not only when we want to rest or when things are going great, but at all times. So instead of moving with effort, ego effort, and against the current, because we were taught to struggle, we simply let the current move us. Yes, the ego will say, but what I want is up there. Yes, but only the ego can say that. What is the illusion of control? Well, from a young age, we are conditioned to believe that our security, our happiness, and success come from our ability to control life. We make plans, set goals, and hold on to expectations, believing that if we just try hard enough, they will bend to our will. And yes, we might have later learned that we don't have to work hard but smarter, still an ego based concept. That's not surrender, but working with a little less struggle. But what happens when life takes an unexpected turn? For example, when things don't go according to plan, as you wished, we get anxious, frustrated, afraid, depressed, and suffering arises. Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to swim against the current? Or if you have never experienced that, let's say to walk against a very strong wind, or have a conversation with someone opposed to every single thing you say. Think of a time when you resisted something in your life: an ending relationship, a job not working out, a delay in your plans. How much energy did you spend trying to make it work the way you thought it should? Now, recall the time when you finally let go and when you surrendered to what was unfolding, not by giving up, but by accepting what was with comprehension. What happened? More often than not, peace of mind happened. A new path emerged, one that you could not have predicted until you let go of the one you were on. You know, giving up comes from frustration, exhaustion, or doubt. It feels like resignation because you've lost hope. You feel defeated and sad. That's the ego definition. It's like, why bother? It's a why bother moment. The ego convinces you that nothing is working. That's not surrendering. That's the ego making you think that surrender is that, giving up. Surrendering feels like relief. and peace because you know you are divinely supported, even though you cannot ego see it or yet. You know that your higher self is in control and you are no longer forcing any outcome. Yes, surrender is having faith. It is. Lao Tzu said, when I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. Surrendering is not passive. It is not giving up. It is deeply active in the most profound way. It is the courage to release our mental resistance and align with ourselves with the divine flow. It is to trust that we are being carried by something greater than our limited perception. Resistance is an ego strategy. As I mentioned in previous episodes, the mind operates with two thought systems, the ego one or the higher self one. The ego thrives on control, fear, and attachment. It whispers, if you don't take charge, everything will fall apart. It equates surrender with powerlessness and weakness. But here's the truth, the only thing that falls apart when we surrender is the illusion that we were never in control. We never fall apart. We can only fall ego apart. Jesus said in the Gospel of Philip, do not seek to become free while clinging to what enslaves you. What enslaves us? Our need to control, our attachment to how things should be, could be, our identification with fear and resistance. True freedom comes from, not from force actually, it comes from allowing. When we surrender, we allow. We step into a higher intelligence that moves through us effortlessly. We allow life to be as we are. There is such a misunderstood teachings on surrender. Many have been taught that surrender means becoming passive or doing nothing. Some interpret the words be still and know that I am as an instruction to cease all action, wait, just wait. But true surrender does not mean inaction. It means inspired action. So going with the divine flow. Jesus himself spoke of surrender in a way that is often misinterpreted or was when he said, not my will, but yours will be done. It was not an act of giving up, but an alignment with the divine will. He was showing us that surrender is the path to divine strength. He did not resist what was unfolding, nor did he try to force an outcome, a different outcome. He surrendered into divine guidance, and in doing so, he fulfilled his highest purpose, his mission. We don't have all the same mission. This aligns perfectly with another quote from A Course in Miracles. When you have learned how to decide with God, all decisions become as easy and as light as breathing. There's no effort, and you will be led as gently as if you were being carried down a quiet path in summer. Can you imagine a life where decisions are effortless, where you are guided as gently as a leaf carried by the wind? This is the power of surrender. A little parenthesis here about your will and God's will. God's will for you is perfect happiness, as we can read in A Course in Miracles and as it explains it. This is a radical statement because we have been conditioned to believe that God's will might be something separate from our own, something imposed upon us. But in truth, there's no conflict between our true will and the will of the divine mind. Even Bashar speaks of this as following your highest excitement, not as fleeting pleasure, but as an inner resonance, a deep alignment with our true self. Wisdom traditions, including Sophia's wisdom's teaching, remind us that when we surrender to divine will, We are not sacrificing anything real. We are simply releasing illusion. It's not about losing anything, but about finally seeing clearly. Our highest joy, our deepest peace, and our greatest fulfillment are already aligned with the divine will. It is only the ego that is insisting on something else, creating the illusion of struggle. So the question is not, will I surrender to God's will? But rather, am I willing to remember that God's will, or the divine mind's will, and my true will are one and the same? Think about this. So, how do we surrender in daily life? How do we move from resistance to flow? Well, first we can pause and acknowledge resistance. Whenever you feel stress, frustration, or fear, pause. Ask yourself, what am I resisting? What am I afraid to let go of? You will find something the ego wants to control. We can shift from force to trust. So instead of asking, how can I make this work? Ask, what is life showing me? What is the divine unfolding for me that my ego veils? We can release the how. The ego is obsessed with knowing how everything will work out or will be done. But surrender asks us to focus on the what, the deep knowing that all things are unfolding perfectly, even when we cannot understand them in the moment. The how does not belong to the ego, and it never did. The ego can only see the result. We can practice the art of allowing. Life is always speaking to us, always guiding us. When we stop resisting, so controlling, we begin to notice the signs, the synchronicities, and the effortless unfolding of events. Have you ever had a moment where the minute you let go of trying so hard, everything just fell into place? That's the divine flow. We can deepen our connection to the present. Surrender is impossible when we are trapped in the past regrets or the future worries. Only the ego has a timeline where past, present, and future exist in different moments. Bring your awareness fully into the now, where divine intelligence is always present. And you can only live in the now anyway. So, what is the effortless way? A great paradox is that the ego makes surrender feel difficult. It convinces us that letting go is hard, that we must work to achieve surrender. But surrender is not something we do at all, it is something we allow. Mhm. The truth is, divine flow is already happening. It is not something we create, but we just stop resisting and align with. Our only task is to align ourselves with it. Here's a question you can journal on later. What would happen if, just for today, you stopped resisting life? If you trusted that you are already being carried by divine wisdom, how would it feel to simply allow? You can dive deeper into this week's topic with the e-guide about the will of the divine and rediscovering your true will beyond the ego. So this is an invitation. Let go. Trust. To surrender into the hands of the divine intelligence, God, source, the divine mind, whatever feels right for you. Where all things are already working in perfect harmony. It is something so difficult for the ego to comprehend. So as you go about your days, ask yourself, where am I still resisting letting go and trusting? Where am I still trying to force my own way instead of trusting the greater wisdom within me? And then with each breath, practice relaxing, practice releasing, practice saying, My ego's will is not my will, and it is not my divine essence will. When you will surrender, you will not lose yourself, but you will finally find yourself. I invite you to walk this path with grace, trust, and an open heart, with love and gratitude. And remember that the universe has always been conspiring for our highest good, even when we don't ego see it. Thank you for joining me in this week's reflection. I hope you enjoy my love and gratitude series as much as I do, and as always, I encourage you to share with your friends and audience. We never know who needs to hear this. Remember to breathe in, to let go of all your ego based thoughts and vision, to see from your soul, and to love out. See you next week. If this reflection resonated with you and you feel called to deepen your practice, I invite you to explore the e-guides or spiritual mind treatments, especially designed to support your journey. You can also join the membership to access all these resources for free. And if you simply wish to give in gratitude, donations are always welcome with love. Simply follow the links in the description. However you choose to engage and share, know that your presence and devotion to your path are truly appreciated.